From this moment on, you will now be known as Sharkbait.
Sharkbait! Ooh-ha-ha!
Welcome, brother Sharkbait.
Sharkbait! Ooh-ha-ha!
Enough with the Sharkbait.
Sharkbait! Ooh!
What's up, YouTube people? This is D from Brooklyn. What's up? And I'm just back to cover a very important topic and something that is very often overlooked. One of the most important and essential pieces of equipment in any fish tank, whether it's saltwater or fresh: heaters. It's something that I just most recently, I was in my local fish store and I was looking at, some stuff, looking at some fish, just walking through as we tend to do. And I was hearing people talking about the tank. And one thing, here in New York, it's wintertime. They bought the filter, bought the tank. They even bought the fish, which always disturbs me. But one thing that wasn't even mentioned is the heater. I don't know about where you are, but in New York right now, it's 11 degrees outside. I don't know how warm it is in the apartment, but I would say that warrants you buying a heater for most fish. And it's something that a lot of the times I hear people, we run out, we get things, we buy all kinds of crazy stuff. But it is very essential to running most any tank. It's something that you got to talk about. So I thought I would just spend 1 minute really quick to go over some very important aspects of heaters. So let's look at these three. There's 5 very important aspects of a heater. 1, the control. You want to be able to set it really easily. Basically, this is something you want to set it and forget it. But you want it to be easy to set. You want to know that it's set right, and you want it to be accurate. Then there goes into the size. Now, depending on where you're going to put it in the tank, you want to have room for it to fit in your tank where it's not very out in your face, and you still have it in the area that it's clear, it's not obstruction, it's not in the dirt, and you can be able to see whether it's working or not. Now, we all got different needs, we all got different spaces, and we all got different tanks. And that's one of the things that you want to think about so that you can take that under consideration when you're choosing the kind of heater for your tank. Whether you want it fully submerged, you want exterior controls, you want interior controls, you want to be able to set your heater, you want it to be adequate, and you want to know that it's working, and it has to fit the style of your aquarium. Now, how do you know your heater is working? Basically, most heaters, whether it's glass or titanium, have an indicator. Some are inside the tank, some are outside the tank. So it makes it very easy to set it, see when your heater's on, see when your heater's on, and whether you need to make any adjustments. Some heaters have the thermostat and controls built into them, but you still like to have a thermometer so that you can check the temperature of the water and make sure that your heater is providing the temperature that you're looking for. Now, that would bring us to durability. Whether you have a reef tank, a freshwater tank, or just loaded with plants, that'll determine whether you want a titanium heater like this one or you want a glass heater, because in tanks with lots of rocks, you might worry about the heater getting banged up on the live rock or in rock in a tank, and things that may cause the heater to be damaged or even shatter. So you want to think about that when you're choosing the heater. And last but not least, there's the one that drives us all: price. Now, I just had a very in-depth conversation about equipment because a friend of mine came over. He's like, man, I can't believe how much you spend on an aquarium, man. I spend that on my car, this or that, and this and that. And I was like, yeah, but that's saying the same thing about your car. Some people go in and buy the cheapest tires that they can find and put them on a $40,000 car. Now, same thing with aquarium. Do you want to put thousands of dollars in fish, equipment, coral, live rock, and then spend $10 on a heater to keep all of that stuff running? I don't think so. So let's look at the heaters. And price is a driving force, but you know what they say, you get what you pay for. And when you buy cheap, sometimes you get cheap. So now here's a heater, and that brings us to that first mention of control. Now, my heater, it doesn't matter what the brand is, but I am a person that prefers to have control over my stuff. This particular tank is in my basement, which means it's colder than the rest of the house. And if the temperature drops, maybe I want to raise the temperature a little bit in the aquarium. Now, do I want to stick my hands all the way inside the tank and fiddle with the top controls? Depending on what tank you have, maybe you can do that. Or in most cases, you just set it and forget it. In my case, I like to have the controls outside the tank, which is why I personally go for exterior controlled heaters. Now, that doesn't mean that it has a thermostat on the outside, but that means that if I look at the temperature of the tank, I can make a quick adjustment to compensate without sticking my hands in the tank. In this tank, you'll see that the heater is on the base of the tank. It's a titanium heater, but I still have the good old-fashioned thermometer there, so that I can make on-the-fly controlled adjustments to the heater. Now, that doesn't mean that that's the best heater on earth, and that by far you may have your own preference. I know plenty of people, including myself, that have used glass heaters for years and years. But when I'm using a tank and I have a lot of rock, I tend to go for the titanium, just because I'm worried that I'll be fiddling around and cleaning it, and maybe I'll bang the heater with one of these rocks, which has been known to happen. I don't know about you, but I'm definitely guilty. So the controllability is a major factor. Now, indicators. Most of you, if any of you have been to my Facebook page or any other page, or if you've had experiences with heaters on your own, how many times have you looked at a heater and be like, man, I wonder if my heater is on? Or, you know, you're in your house, maybe it's chilly, or you got 3 feet of snow outside, and you're like, man, I wonder what temperature my tank is. Well, personally, I have never been a fan of the stick-on thermometers. Even though I use them for a quick reference, I always have to have something to verify that number, because like anything, you got to remember, this is a piece of plastic. Glass does not retain heat like plastic does. Plastic almost always disperses heat a lot slower than glass. Glass, if it's cold to the touch, it transmits that cold right into the water. You tend to have a lot of fluctuations with temperature and heat, so I like the good old-fashioned thermometers. Or you can get a heater that has the temperature probes pretty much built into it nowadays. They even have digital ones. I'm sorry I don't have one to show you, but I've played around with digital ones and I've had them go wrong, and I've put faith into some of them. So me personally, I like the good old-fashioned, they're not filled with mercury anymore, but good old glass thermometers. And if I can hide it, like in this tank, you will never see it, but I know where it is. It's always good. So I like to have heaters with indicators. You may not, but just when looking for a heater, you want to have some measure of when your heater is on and when it's off. Otherwise, you really don't have any way of knowing whether it's working or not. Now that brings us to the other item of discussion, durability. Now if you take a good close look at this one, this heater is glass, and you'll notice that it began to burn through its little glass retaining area there, which means two things. A, it wasn't working anymore, and it sent the tank that this was actually in into a 20-degree drop because the heater wasn't working. Second, it's a really it's hazardous if you're sticking your hands in the tank and your heater has been damaged and you don't know, because these things run on electricity and they will release electricity into water. So when using a glass heater, and they're very good, there's nothing wrong with this heater, it's a very good heater. Maybe it's old, maybe it's defective, whatever. You want to keep in mind a certain amount of clearance around the heater so that you don't accidentally damage it or hit it while moving things in your tank. Now, last and most importantly, the biggest topic and item of discussion, price. Now, let's take a look. Let's take a second. Now, let's look at this. Now, you know, you go to the coral store, you go to the fish store. I just had a friend that told me, oh, well, he was looking at an Achilles tang. His Achilles tang cost him over $170. So, all right, there's $170. Now you got one mushroom. Let's just say this little mushroom here in a store. This mushroom's about 2 inches across. That mushroom is about, that one's probably about 5 inches across. You're talking about corals that run into the hundreds of dollars. Like this cabbage leather, this size, this cabbage leather is 10 inches across. In the store, that'll run you well over $200. So you got $200 fish, $200 coral, thousands of dollars in livestock and pieces of, you know, living matter in your tank. And then you go out and buy a cheap $15 heater. Now, here lies the gist. If you're willing to take a gamble, and many of us are, and I'm guilty, I've done it in the past, I've done it. Now, what happens when it breaks? You figure you're going to take a gamble, and if it breaks, you may just lose everything in your system for $15 piece of equipment. Now, unless you got a controller, like some of us cuckoo birds here, and you can get an email alert if the temperature drops or if you're if you're running into some catastrophe. I mean, yeah, be my guest, but most of us don't have that luxury. So you want to put a certain amount of confidence in the items, even if it's a filter, piece of equipment, a heater, not only heaters, but certain things. You got to be a little careful with the price because you do get what you pay for. So it's good to have a backup. I'm going to add a backup heater to this one. I have the luxury of a controller so I can actually program it. You can't see my heater. It used to be in the sump, but after Hurricane Sandy and I realized when the power went off, oh yeah, there's no flow in the sump and the heater was in the sump. So never thought about that before, but I moved my heater to the main tank. So even if the power goes off, I have a battery backup, I have a generator. This tank can run independently for a few days, and without the water running outside of the tank, everything can run off that one heater, and it's a little safety precaution. So one of the topics I was getting to as far as the cheap heater and the price of a heater, okay, if you have one heater and it goes down, you can have a backup heater. You can have two heaters. So if you want to get a 200-watt heater, you can opt for getting two 100-watt heaters, depending on the size of the tank. Set one for 78 degrees and set one for 77 degrees. So if one fails, the other one will kick on. If it's excessively cold, then guess what? Both of your heaters will run and help to warm your tank better than the one by itself. So that is something to grow on and something to think about. And that's my little 5 minutes on heaters. So I hope that helped you out. It's a very important piece of equipment. I couldn't tell you how many times I've seen people run to the store, people have never bought before, buy everything but for a tank, and then say, oh, I need one of those, and the heater is so much an afterthought. Most of the time they don't buy it. Everything dies, and then we see their tank on the auction table for $5. So that's D. This is my little tip. This is my 2 cents on heaters. Check it out. Put a little thought into it. Make sure you get +1. You know, get one size a little larger for your tank. It helps heat it a little faster, a little more efficiently. And take a minute to think about anything for your tank. You know, so this is D, keeping my sanity by keeping my aquariums. Get your heat on. It's cold in the city. It's cold in New York. Stay warm. Love, peace, and hair grease. This is D saying, see ya. Say bye-bye, shorty. Bye-bye, shorty.